If you'd like to stand, friends. Welcome one and all, and welcome also those of you joining us virtually. As you're able, would you like to join us, the house band and myself, in singing the song on your sheets, Amazing Grace? Please take a seat. Thank you to Fred and Matt and Chris and Jane and Helen and Charlotte, the Ian Tildesley House Band, here in honour of that wonderful musician, Ian Tildesley. And it's on behalf of the whole Tildesley family that I want to thank you for coming and being here with them today. Welcome to this Thanksgiving, this celebration of a life, the life of Ian Tildesley, our friend. We'll follow the flow that's in the booklet, and I hope there's enough for those of you who are standing. My name is Ruth Harvey. I'm a friend and a neighbour of Liz and Ian, and I'm also an ordained minister in the Church of Scotland. And once again, thanks to Fred and the band for holding this space so beautifully on behalf of the whole family. Our first reading this morning is from the book of John, and Louise is going to lead us in that reading.
Good morning, everybody. The first reading is from St. John, and it was particularly chosen by Liz, Ruth, William, Nick, and Marta. As the Father loves me, so I also love you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remained in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. This is my commandment: love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends, because I have told you everything that I have heard from my Father. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you, and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. This I command you, love one another.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, William, for being the prop and the stay. We're now going to hear from the band one of Ian's favourite songs from one of Ian's favourite keyboard musicians, and it's going to be sung for us by Helen. From what I know of Ian, he would be the first to forgive you any bum notes, and probably to point it out as well, maybe. Thank you so much, Helen and Fred. That was beautiful. And now our next reading is going to be shared for us by Chris, a friend of the family.
Now then, everyone. Are you all right? I have to do this. I have to speak like this, if you'll let me off. So, I was a friend of, a colleague of Ian's when he was a careers advisor. And we really got the measure of it. And I like to think of him, describe him as a saucy diplomat. So I've got a couple of poems for you, and the first one is adapted from Rabbie Burns. An honest man lies here at rest, and for his virtues he is blessed. A man of wisdom, friend of truth, a counsellor and guide of youth. A man who by his presence warmed, and with his knowledge so informed. A ready wit to spot a ruse, a raconteur to so amuse. A tone of speech to please the ear, a mind that sought a conscience clear. A man of music constantly, a man who treasured family. Oh, how we value such a friend, and pray his spirit will transcend. Ian Tildesley, rock and roll, everybody. And the next one. This is called The Drummer. The Charlie Watts of Arthur Street, with resonating roll, just tapping out the backbeat with the rhythm of his soul. The bass drum kick, a part of life, forever stays in time. The spirit gigs of afterlife, the sounds he makes divine. For those of us who love you well, you surely are the man. So keep your snare drum tight, my friend, and play as best you can. Ian Tildesley.
Thank you, Chris. I don't know when the lectern was last used as a drum, but it had to be at this event for Ian. Friends, let's join together now in a prayer. Let us pray. Loving God, here and now you are with us. You are with us in our thanksgiving for the life of Ian, as love, sorrow, smiles and tears mingle to remind us of the richness of all of life. Here and now, you are with each of us in our sorrow, and in particular, you're with Liz, and with William, and with Ruth, and with all the family. Surround them, loving God, with the love of friends and family. Let love be our guide, and wisdom our purpose. May we find wholeness and peace in our remembering and in our friendship through Christ, our companion on the way. And now let us share together in the words of the Lord's Prayer, and feel free to use whichever version you're most familiar with. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And I'm now going to hand over to Dominic, who's going to share some reflections and rememberings of Ian.
Good morning, I'm Dominic. I'm Ian's eldest brother. I was not expecting to see you all at a funeral quite so soon again. And it was a very sad occasion and a great shock for me, Ian's death. But nevertheless, despite that sadness, I'm honoured to be asked by Lizzie and William and Ruth to say a few words about my brother. And it's good to see you all here today. And your smiling faces give me courage. Ian was a wonderful man, a kind and gentle person. He also had a distinctive and dry sense of humour, which he refined to perfection over the course of his life. He loved to laugh, and he would not have appreciated a sombre eulogy this morning. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to remember him as I did and tell you one or two stories that you shared with me about him. The world began for Ian and me down at Cheeseman's, which was a big department store in Lewisham High Street. And if you needed a photograph in those days, there were no cameras. You had to go to a salon in order to get your photograph taken, a studio. So Mum and Dad took Michael, Dominic and Ian down, and we were arranged in descending order of height and age. And there on the end of the table was Ian, his face chubby, a huge grin and a great smile. In fact, really very like that smile you see on the front of the booklet today. No change. And he took that smile out into the world. And that world for Ian was Our Lady and St Philip Neri Primary School in Sydenham. This is a rather exclusive preparatory school, nestling in the bomb sites of Catford and Sydenham. And it was there that he learned, with many of us, how to do his sums. And it was there he met his lifelong friend, Nick Tracy, who's not with us today, but is with us online. Nick and he were great friends for over 60 years. And he went with Nick from Our Lady in St Philip Neri School to the Catholic Comprehensive, Bishop Thomas Grant School, where they wreaked havoc together for 5 years. Nick has sent me a complete book of his reminiscences. Unfortunately, it's so rude I can't read out any of them in a crematorium, but I do have copies for sale at the end of my speech. Nick notes in that wonderful set of remembrances that actually Ian was a little bit of a fatty at school and occasionally bullied. But as that fat turned to muscle, so he became the expert at putting the shot and captain of the school judo team. If I had known any of this, I would have treated him with much greater respect. At 14, he began to love the drums. I'll tell you a wonderful story. Mum and Dad took Anne and the younger children, the ones to the left, away on holiday, and they left me in charge of the house with Michael and Ian. Yes. And Michael and Ian barricaded themselves in the newly built upstairs bedroom, and they put mattresses on the wall to deaden the sound. And for a solid week, they played Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. So there was like thunder booming up and down Marler Road. Mum and Dad returned. And the man from across the street was a gentleman called Mr. Halliwell. He was the ex-president of the Victorian Society. Came over to see Mum, and it was poor Ian cowering behind Mum. And he said, Mrs. Tildesley, the noise! And Mum said, yes. He said, I'm very sorry. We rented the house to a band, but it didn't work out, and they've left. And turning round to Ian, she fixed him with her steely gaze and said, and they will not be back again. So nothing was going to put Ian off his drumming. It is kindest to draw a veil over Ian's early academic achievements. He left school with just one GCSE in religious studies. If you knew our family in those days, if you were indeed to get one qualification, that would be the go-to. And he actually left school, 16, with Nick, went up to town to realise his great expectations. And a bit like Copperfield and Steerforth, they met frequently in the inn. And in fact, Nick describes 2 years of binge, and drunken binge. And at that point, Ian and Nick made their only one significant entrepreneurial drive. They wanted to set up a disco, which they called the Flashers Disco. This was an attempt to give music a greater exposure. And I have to tell you, it was a limited success. It flashed once, it flashed twice, and then was seen no more. Ian, at that point, plumbed for the quieter life and headed back to Lewisham Town Hall, where, under the tutelage of Martin Costello, he learned his trade of selling tickets to the public. I want to tell you this story because it really tells you about Ian's very excellent and dry sense of humour. It was a big day at the Town Hall. It was the... I'll just get this name right now. Where is it? Ah, yes. It was the Doris. Yeah. Doris Stokes. Thank you. It was the Doris Stokes concert. Doris was a well-known medium. She did these concerts on the stage. Yeah. And it was a sellout. They were queuing round the block at Lewisham Town Hall. And I have this directly from Martin. The management of the Town Hall gathered behind the cubicle where Ian was selling tickets to see how he would deal with the first person who came in there. And it was a young woman, a youngish woman. She came in and she said to Ian, can I have 2 tickets? And Ian said, 2 tickets for what? He said, 2 tickets for Doris. He said, Doris who? She said, oh, Doris the famous medium. He says, why? He looked down and said, we don't have any Stokes here on the list. Martin, do we have any Stokes in this week? And he said, well, I could give you 2 tickets for the wrestling. She looked at him very sadly, and he turned around and he said, I'm getting something through from Doris. I think you're going to enjoy the rest of it. Doris thinks you'll enjoy the rest of it. And at which point he kind of relented and handed the rather dazed woman a pair of these prize Doris Stokes tickets, much to her relief. You have to remember, all this time Ian was still living at home. He was in his late 20s. He continued to live at home. And what drove him out, actually, was my brother Mark. And he was driven out by the fact that Mark in those days was developing a kind of socialist concept of shared clothing. That brothers could only live by sharing their clothes. And Ian had a rather excellent selection of ties. And Mark had a penchant for Ian's ties. And despite intense security measurements, Ian lost the battle. And the ties began to disappear one by one. So Ian decided he'd have to rethink his position. He'd have to re-examine where he was going to go in life. At which point he married Liz. And can I just say that was perhaps the very best piece of luck he had in the whole of his life. Yep. So they moved north as a pair to Bolton, Lizzie's hometown, and Ian grafted away. And eventually 2 children were born. William and Ruth. The jewels in Ian's crown. Now, you have to understand this about him, that throughout his life, he was an undercover intellectual. He was a closet admirer of the arts and music. He had a great appreciation, second to none, I think, of modern 20th century composers. He had great knowledge of opera. And he was very keen, in fact, that his daughter should become a classical violinist. And until, of course, Ruth eventually, as a teenager, told him what to do with the violin. And I recall he actually hung it up on the living room wall as a record to his failed ambitions. But he not only loved to listen to music, he had a great collection of CDs, but he also loved to play it. He loved to drum. He loved to play rock, pop. He particularly loved country music, where he always laid down that steady rhythm, which kind of begged you to dance. He was the go-to drummer on the Lake District circuit, and a proud member of many a fine band, both in the north and the south, some of whom are here today. And I remember that wonderful evening of Ruth's 21st birthday, I think, probably in the cricket club somewhere around Penrith, and we had a wonderful concert there that night. It lasted to the wee small hours of the morning. So apart from his love of music, he was also a great aficionado of hi-fi equipment. And he must have spent half his living wage on new hi-fi equipment. Every time he came to visit me, we would go down to Richer Sounds, and we would buy new hi-fi, paid 50 quid a metre, that kind of stuff. And then he would come back to the house and he would rewire my equipment and he would move the speakers around the room, and I have to tell you, it made not one single difference to the sound. The only thing I can say for certainty is the sounds got richer and Ian and I got poorer. And until recently, Ian was also a very, very avid reader until his eyesight began to fail. He was a great reader of the classics. He loved Dickens, he loved George Eliot, he loved Tolstoy, he loved Graham Greene. And he and I spent many hours on the phone, as he did with many of you, talking about these important characters and these heroines and heroes, and the many important ideas on kind of social justice and human nature that he found in those novels, those ideas which influenced him so deeply. He also loved a good detective yarn, and he was a particular fan of Ian Rankin's Detective Rebus. I think he rather fancied himself as Big Ger Cafferty, the ageing Edinburgh gangster. He often did a great impression of Ger on a night out in Penrith. From my dad, my father Bert, he learnt to be a great handyman and a decorator. He painted and papered for England, and in later life he learnt many new wonderful woodworking skills. His masterpiece were the banisters in the stately home at Arthur Street. They were like the great Bernini columns in St. Peter's Square around the Vatican, each one chiselled by hand and fitted neatly into place and rearranged and painted 3 or 4 times before Ian was finally satisfied. He really enjoyed keeping the house in tip-top order, to the extent that, unfortunately, when the ambulance people arrived very recently, the first thing they commented was on the wonderful decorative state of the floor. In earlier years, he also very much enjoyed walking the dogs Bob and Layla, the boxers, in the beautiful Lake District landscape, or when he found himself on holiday with Lizzie and the family strolling on a beach in Scotland, or, as I remember him most dramatically, in Verbier in Switzerland, up behind Montreux and Lake Leman, listening to a wonderful Verdi concert and staying in a Swiss chalet. That was a beautiful, beautiful evening. He loved the countryside. And you can actually, one of William's favourite memories of his dad was the walks that they used to do along Hadrian's Wall with one another. And they would have long discussions of politics and religion and the world. And you can still hear those discussions if you listen to William today. For many years, Lizzie and Ian owned a small post office in Bolton, where he was kindness itself to many of the pensioners who called in. This was to make up for his behaviour in the box office at Lewisham. He's also very kind to the Bolton Constabulary, who often sat behind the curtain waiting for a particular gang of armed robbers who they thought were going to rob his post office. I have to say that Ian wanted a change. He wasn't so frightened of the armed robbers as he was of the post office, and with good reason. And he made a change. He went to Manchester University. He blagged his way onto a postgraduate course in careers advising, which is quite an achievement when you think about the qualifications he had. And he did well. He successfully changed his career, and he indeed changed the career of many young Cumbrian school children whom he advised. It's funny, he was not always happy at work because he was angry about the lack of opportunities for young people. He was often angry with authority when he ever saw injustice or unfairness, and he was passionate about providing opportunities for everybody where he could see those opportunities. This is particularly true of young people, and particularly true of the treatment of refugees in this country. He felt very strongly about these things. Most of all, Ian, throughout the years, was a fine husband and a fine father. He was a gentleman, kind and tolerant, and normally patient. He was, at his very root, a peacemaker. William tells me that on a number of occasions, when he had driven his mum to complete distraction and she was moving towards the broom, Ian would step in between them and calm the situation down. And I can say, on many occasions, he pulled me back from my righteous indignation with family and friends with a simple calming word. So blessed are the peacemakers. He was also a very faithful man. He led a very faithful family life. His pleasure was to see his children develop to their full potential and to love and to support them in every single possible way. And he was very, very proud of his two grandchildren, Grace and Ruth and Tom, who wasn't his grandchild. As it says in that wonderful reading from St. John, which we heard right at the very beginning of the service, he really was the kind of man who did lay down his life for those that he loved. Not in a dramatic way, but continually and steadily. For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. I hope I've done Ian some justice. He really was an excellent son, an excellent husband, a fine father, a fine brother, and a fine friend to many of the people around this room. He was a wonderful man, and I will miss him sorely. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you so much. So many memories, and now there's an opportunity for us in quiet as we're sitting here just to take a few moments to let those memories sink in and to consider other memories of Ian, how we knew him. And after a few seconds of silence, I'll come back and draw us together again. So a time of quiet just to remember Ian. There'll be time to share these stories later as well, so don't worry, we'll have a chance to do more of that. But some time of quiet. As we've heard from Dominic and from others, Ian was a man committed to justice amongst many other things, particularly for young people and for refugees, as we've heard. So in a sign of solidarity with all those who are on the margins of life, on the margins of our world, and as a sign of solidarity with one another and with Ian's family, you're invited now just to turn to those next to you, maybe shake a hand, share a sign of peace as a sign of solidarity with one another. Fred and the band are going to lead us in singing now a song, May the Choir of Angels. And Charlotte, I believe, is going to come and lead the singing. You're invited, as you are able, to join in, particularly with those words that are in bold, where it says all. And I think you can... do you want to stay seated for this? Those of you at the back have no choice, but we'll stay seated on the whole. Thank you, Charlotte and Fred.
Make the Lord enfold you in his love.
After some closing words, the Ian Tildesley House Band will play You Are the Sunshine of My Life, and we're free then to leave following the family. You'll see on the last sheet of the booklet that there is a charity to whom you're welcome to give donations in memory of Ian. And then also you'll find details about how to join with the family after this celebration and thanksgiving of the life of Ian Tildesley. And so, some closing words of prayer. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the Son of Peace to you. And the blessing of God, Creator, Son and Spirit, guard and guide us all, today, tomorrow, and forevermore. Amen. Take it away.
Loved you for a million years.